Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Governing Board Equity and Student Success Academy webinar on a board primer on equitable student success.
And before we begin, good afternoon, everyone. We would just like to take a minute by acknowledging the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians people, traditional custodians of the land on which the Gardner Institute resides, and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We extend that respect to all Indigenous people here today.
Thank you, Dr. Flippenwin.
You are welcome. Thank you.
And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. Dr. Brent Drake, Senior Vice President for Operations and Research at the Gardner Institute. Dr. Monica Flippenwin, Associate Vice President. Myself, Victoria McGillen. Sarah Stein-Koch, Institute Fellow and Senior Associate for Institutional Support, and Ed Willis, our Senior Fellow. We will be here to provide you with a 10,000-foot overview of what boards need to know about what is currently working in equitable student success, what the literature is telling us about where we are seeing success, and particularly success with historically resilient populations.
And yeah, thank you, Vicki. As you can see from our agenda for today, we're in the midst of the welcome introduction and agenda, but then we're going to open it up to talk a little bit about what is happening on your campuses, what is going on that impacts equitable student success on your campuses, and how do the boards learn about those initiatives and outcomes. We're then going to talk about the big why boards need to hear about student success initiatives and how boards are likely to hear about them. And then we're going to spend a little time reviewing some best practices out there in terms of evidence-based practices for equitable student success. And finally, after all that, we'll have a little bit of a small group discussion where we'll talk about what you heard in the initiatives, what you think exists on your campus, how you should hear about these things, how often you should hear about these things, what is the best way for you to hear about these types of items. I'll pass it back to Dr. McGillen.
All right, I guess that's me then. We're heading right into the discussion. And these, Brent mentioned the questions. We're just very interested and we want to take a few minutes to find out what is going on. And we're particularly interested in what the board knows and how they learn about these efforts and their outcomes. So when you think about your institution, what's currently going on to address retention and student success, and are there particular initiatives that are targeted toward equity gaps? And then how does the board learn about these efforts? So we'll open it up and we're interested in finding out what's going on and then how you connect that to your board. So do you want to take the screen down maybe, Vicki? And so let's start with the first, what's currently going on, and then maybe you can tell us how the board learns about these kinds of initiatives.
I'll start. And we have our board member, Larry Benz, here, which I'm so glad to see you, Larry. I'm sure you're on the road somewhere. And he's going to speak at the AGB conference. So that's great. So, you know, what the initiative did for the people on the campus is it made us, this sounds like an awkward thing to say, to have a laser focus on retention and graduation. Now it's our job to have that, but it just brought it front of mind. So I declared this year the year of retention, and we outlined probably 25 initiatives. I'm just going to mention a couple to focus on retention. And then we started, we're having a teaching and learning day-long retreat for teaching faculty, and it's all focused on retention and what faculty can do to impact retention. So some of the things we did was, so we looked at our at-risk students, and our at-risk students could be not in the class of underrepresented, but if you look at the Venn diagram, our Black students tend to be underrepresented, of course, under-resourced, often first generation, and sometimes low GPA. So there's that group. So we offered a scholarship to those students if they would attend our academic support services. We call those REACH. And we offered a scholarship, and we didn't have all of the students take advantage of it, because right now, before we offered that, the students that go to our academic support services tend to have a 3.0 or better. They're wanting to get into professional school. They want to raise their GPA. But of the students that did participate, their retention rate was higher by 13% than the students that didn't. So we know that worked. And now for the next iteration, we're going to raise the scholarship amount because there's a return on investment there. So that was one of the things we did. And then the other thing is we got our faculty to do the early alert 2 weeks early.
Yeah.
So we could do our interventions. And one of the outcomes for us is we had fewer withdrawals of students than we'd had in the past. With all this work, the other stat I'll give you is our first-time full-time freshman retention from fall to spring is higher than our pre-COVID levels.
Okay.
Now, for the whole cohort of students we have, it's not, because we still have that lagging, withdrawals from COVID that we have. But this was, and it's important to say this was our largest freshman class in recent history, and our retention of that class was better than pre-COVID levels. So I think there's some really positive checks here that we can do. And we report this to the board in committee meetings, at the Academic Affairs Committee meeting, and then at the full board in the President's report. And I think I mentioned to you all at one time, we have a very unique board because all the members sit through all the committee meetings, even if they aren't on that committee. So each time the board gets together, they hear something about student success. And I'll let Larry jump in with his perspective as a board member.
Thanks, Lori.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, appreciate it. I think, some of the keys to reaching this group is the fact that it's a more difficult group to reach for all of the, reasons that Lori mentioned. Some of them work part-time, some of them have transportation issues. So really trying to, incentives work to a large extent, but they don't work if people have logistical problems or if they have other obstacles that prevent them from participating in the very things that can help them. And so that's really where a lot of thought and, suggestions need to come in. There's no doubt that when you gather a group that's underrepresented, social anxiety, some generation, they're not used to the constraints, the regulatory things and impacts around schools and all the things that go with it. And we're trying to leverage what we've seen in the research and the evidence about how to best gather this group. Intrusive counseling, high touch technology, in order to, help on retention and help, data mined and proactively reach out to them in advance. But these are all the challenges. We're very excited. I think Lori's first point is actually the truest one and the best one, which is that when you focus on it, there's a certain Hawthorne effect, if you will, of you get what you emphasize, not what you measure. And so emphasizing retention, emphasizing student success, compassion and caring for that first generation underrepresented student in and of itself will work independent of some of the underlying interventions and techniques.
Thank you.
We also have another board member here, and we also have Gail Dupuy, who actually led all our retention efforts. After everyone speaks, if you want more details, we can task both of them to make a comment.
Okay. We'll ask them if they have anything they'd like to add at this point, and then we'll check in with a couple of other institutions. But it's pretty exciting to hear Larry as a board member speak so eloquently and knowledgeably about student success efforts. So that makes me very hopeful. Gail, did you want to add anything, or?
I didn't really have anything too earth-shattering to add. I would say, I think having Lori and the board talk frequently about retention and student success really made a difference across campus and helped, everybody understand that we're all in this together, and that there are efforts that we can initiate at the university level that then trickle down into the units and vice versa. I mean, there are things that are being done in the units that we sort of elevated and are doing university-wide.
Great.
Cheryl? Did you
Yes, yes. One of the things I'm hoping to get out of our discussion today is the students that we're not reaching. Are there places, are there other schools where they're reaching the kinds of students that we're having a little more difficulty reaching? And I'm all about sharing and finding out what's working someplace else and trying to implement that here at our school. I think, we might be leading in some areas, but other people might, and the sharing of those ideas could really help us, because I think we're making tremendous strides and tremendous efforts towards, the retention of students. And I've always felt like that getting students in is one thing, but they're already there and it's a captive audience. And how can we wrap around? How can we put our arms around them even more to maybe get that next segment of kids to stay? So looking to you all to help us with some of that, maybe.
Well, I hope we'll plant some ideas today. Let's hear from a couple of other institutions. So Herman, do you want to speak to the questions? Oh, you're muted again.
Okay.
There you are.
I would like to say, in terms of working with our students and our service areas reporting to the board, what we have been doing in terms of we have had a reorganization of our student support services area. And what we have been trying to do with many of our students are first generation of students that come to us with very little financial support other than the federal financial aid, which is not enough to keep them from not having to, be free to continue school in a manner where they feel, sort of secure. So we have been constantly seeking external funding support for those students, and then at the same time looking for those students that we can find who would have high GPAs and are able to maintain almost on their own, while we continue to assist those students that need some assistance. So as when we lose some of those students that have some problems financial or been unable to continue in school, then we would have a balance of students that would keep enrollment up, so that we can provide additional services to those students that still needs financial assistance and those kinds of things. So our student support office reports to the board where the students are, how many students are here, and how many and that enroll in those kinds of programs. And so we are then having some idea of where we are. And now, we are becoming even more involved as a board with this initiative as it results in this kind of training that we have now, to get suggestions and ideas from others so that we can continue to look at ways in which we can augment these students towards maintaining their academic pursuit of a degree and be able to go out there and get a job.
Okay. Frank, can we hear from you?
Yes, it's good to be with you. I'm Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Simmons College of Kentucky. And as you may know, in our work here as an HBCU, there are some opportunities that lend itself to more nurturing focal point that's built around culturation that seems to help strengthen the cohort bonds. What is also done, in that we're smaller, is our board collaborates with our senior level administration in each board meeting. So all of us are in, and we report to the board all of the data points, findings that have happened from board meeting to board meeting as it would relate to all areas, whether it's academics, our student services, and those board reports are often questioned. And we do have three trustees in particular that have worked directly with college, and they understand the actual student aspect. And so they generally are effective in bringing up questions concerning what we have presented that the rest of the board are then able to chime in upon. And so that has been very effective. And the sensitivity, because we, as a team, we try to inform our board of the challenges that students have. And then often they respond right on the plate. Well, I can offer this, or after a meeting, that they will walk up to the respective administrator and they will say, well, I know someone I can, and they make the connection. And so there is an opportunity to, on a quick response, address any matters that may come up. So the network is there. We also have a student representative that is on our board, so that any concern that comes up, and as well as a faculty representative, but any concern that comes up, that typically is the SGA president. They are well aware of anything that happens that's student related, and they can answer that question since they're in attendance at the meeting. And so all of this has helped us to be kind of laser focused on our mission to develop our students academically. I want to also say that in our work, we have developed a food pantry. We started in partnership with Dare to Care area organizations, churches that have, even Kroger, that have contributed resources where we go and we buy, and the students can come with no trepidation. They can just come and receive from this food pantry, and there's some clothing that is there available and some other supplies, pens, paper, etc. And so that has been an opportunity that the students have seized upon. But what we did with some funding that we received, we developed what's called the Falcon Academic Center for Excellence, better known as FACE. And the staff that are in there are very intrusive, very intensive. It's almost like a case management format where they drill down to the nitty-gritty issues that students are having. And the director of their FACE is a very resourced driven person, and resourceful in that she has done this work in another area of the country. And so she has brought her skills to bear. Her name is Ingrid Bowman Thomas here at Simmons. And she just takes things to heart, but she has given the intensive care levels that's directly anything that is impeding academic success in the student, that area is there. So if it's clothing, and we have a laundromat on our campus, so if students are having problems with getting clothes washed without any shame and a whole lot of notification, they are directed to the building that has the laundromat. They can just wash their clothes, just basic needs that come up, and without cost. They do not have to pay for that. And so then we have also, of course, tried to do other things with the student organizations that help with the campus life and that help with peer-to-peer encouragement and accountability. So the various things where we can develop a cohort of students that look after each other, that's something that is a part of our framework. So every now and then you get a hint from somebody that, well, so-and-so is having some problems. And so we are able to look at that, or something bubbles up among another student and they will quickly say, you need to go see Miss Ingrid, or you need to go see so-and-so. And what that does is it helps them connect more with what resources are truly available to them here through the institution. I'll stop with that.
Okay, thank you for that. Really rich description of the things that are going on. It's exciting to hear that boards are so connected and engaged with what's going on. And I heard you use the word intrusive and Larry used the word intrusive. And so there's a real effort to get connected to your students. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ed to sort of get us into a reminder about the why we're doing this. But it feels to me like you have a sense of that deep why.
Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues, and thanks, Sarah. Really appreciate that. But you're absolutely right. Our colleagues thus far have really honed in on the why, right? The why it's important for boards to really think about student success and zero in on student success as a way to think about and impact the campus. We certainly believe, and as you see on the screen, really feel like it's a moral obligation that boards think about student success. At the end of the day, really drill down to it. The question around why are we here? Why are boards doing the work they're doing? Why are faculty and administrators and even student leaders on campus doing the work they're doing? They're doing it for students, right? And so as you go about your work as a board member, always reminding yourself of why you're doing what you're doing, the why in terms of your service. It also speaks to relationships with stakeholders, both internally at the institution as well as external stakeholders as well, in terms of the why. Institutional revenue, certainly around student success and retention and capturing tuition dollars and fees and beyond that, help your institution grow and sustain itself. And as my good colleague, artist Hampshire Cohen reminds us all the time, that is a critical fiduciary responsibility for the board, but student success is as well. And it's at the heart of really building those institutional revenues. Interaction with principles of trusteeship, those things that you learned from a governance standpoint in terms of the set of work and the way to approach it. It's all about the why you're doing the work you're doing. And as a part of this project, we are also wanting to develop with boards, if you haven't done it, and then apply an equity lens to your governance. how diverse is your institution? How are you serving those students who come to your doors? At the end of the day, students are, if you will, signing a contract with the university. The students are going to do the things that they've entered into at the university. They're going to obviously study hard, be good citizens on the campus. But what, as an institution, we have a responsibility all the way through board members to support students in that way. And so those all become wise in terms of the work we're doing. And so critically important, and always a good guide in terms of reminding ourselves of the work we do. Vicki,
Thank
am I
you,
turning
Ed.
it to you? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And this is, again, just a reminder coming from our presentation on governing board imperative of how it is that boards are likely to end up hearing about student success initiatives that have been employed on your campus. And it comes from your responsibilities around the institutional decisions around people, whether it's hiring of a chancellor or president, or whether it's the request for additional lines that they're coming to the board and seeking approval for funding for. But these are gonna come to you around questions about people. They're gonna come to you around policy issues, particularly policy issues that have been voted upon by the board in the past, or changes in practices that would be so significant in terms of changes to the culture that they feel the need to ensure the board is fully behind these institutional changes. Most critically, as Ed just indicated, when it comes to creating or expanding resources, there is no question that your institution will be sharing information about these kinds of proposed initiatives. The creation of targeted programs often will require additional institutional resources. So you are likely to hear from your institutions when they are seeking this kind of support from the board. We're now going to shift and move into what are the evidence-based student success initiatives and what do boards need to know in terms of those initiatives. And as I indicated, these are going to be at a fairly 10,000-foot level. But all of these initiatives that are listed here have documented significant impact in terms of impacting student retention, student completion, and in particular also having a significant impact on populations of our students that have traditionally lagged behind others in success metrics. So the initiatives that we're going to be covering today include equity initiatives, course and curricular redesign, including pedagogic redesign, high impact practices, which you have undoubtedly heard about at your board meetings in the past, advising, mentoring, and coaching initiatives, those kinds of efforts that put people in the space with students, belonging enhancement initiatives, things that change the institutional campus culture to enhance the opportunities for students to feel a sense of belonging. Those that are addressing physical and mental health wellness initiatives, efforts to identify risk, retention risk, and to act on those retention risk identification efforts, student financial initiatives, both emergency and more long-term, academic success initiatives, and initiatives addressing professional development. All of these have shown significant impact in student success. I'm now going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Vicki. And I think that many of these will be familiar to you. We know that faculty and staff have a myriad of strategies to do their work based on discipline, student level that they work with, teaching style, and lots of other factors. But research has established that some of these strategies are more effective than others. As Vicki mentioned, George Koo has done a significant amount of work and scholarship in this area, and he stated that students who use these approaches, these high impact practices, tend to earn higher grades and retain, integrate, and transfer information at higher rates. And so these should look somewhat familiar to you, but I'll just touch on each one very quickly. The common experience can be something like a common reading that happens for first-year students or sophomore students. It's anything that connects them with an integrated and common experience. First-year seminars, typically credit-bearing courses. They're taught by faculty or staff. They're writing intensive at times, and they're focused on information literacy, academic skills, and preparing the student to enter and stay in the institution. Sometimes they're a catch-all for lots of different things, but the focus is to help the student feel engaged and connected to the institution. Learning communities are linked courses. They can be paired with a residential experience also, but they can just be strictly academic and have courses together that have a common theme. Just an example, like a sports ethics theme, where you have an English course that's focused on literature around sports, and a philosophy course that is then deals with the ethics part, but all the readings are focused on sports. So that's a way to develop a learning community around an area of interest for students. There are lots and lots of those. Undergraduate research, of course, is done in connection with faculty in the discipline of the student's choice. E-portfolios are sort of and capstone courses, those are at the tail end of the student experience, but an electronic representation of their learning. A capstone course is a senior year project that integrates and applies all their learning. Let's see, diversity and global learning. You might see things like study abroad and other global opportunities. And what we're seeing, I think, is those are becoming more and more connected to the curriculum, as opposed to just, oh, wouldn't it be nice if you could travel over spring break? That it's more focused as a way to engage students in the curriculum and give them an experience that's beyond the institution and beyond their state or their city and their country. And then finally, service learning is another high impact practice. It's an opportunity to connect curriculum and the community. I've seen very successful programs with the schools of business who are working with local and nonprofits in the area who could use some additional financial assistance with their accounting and also marketing and other facets of the business school. So those are a number of high impact practices that have shown that they increase retention, engagement, and persistence to graduation. So the next way that we want to focus on engaging students in the curriculum and creating a connection to the institution is through academic advising programs. And I heard someone mention that about intrusive advising. There's lots of ways to register for classes. And that's a very transactional thought about just getting registered. You can do it online, you can do it in person. Some people use a catalog still. But the focus on an equitable student success practice is much more about the relationship and the connection than it is about transaction. And so academic advising that focuses on the whole student, on developing and providing an experience for each student that they need to navigate the curriculum and the institution, and looking at them, connecting them to resources at the institution is what makes it a student success practice. Academic success coaching is a focus on developing skills to help the students be more successful in the academic portion of their life. And again, it's creating another connection and relationship with someone at the institution. It can be peer, or it can be, a professional staff or faculty member that does that level of coaching. And then mentor programs are much more focused on the whole student. So not just the academic piece, but really how is the student managing their life, their social skills, and their life skills, as well as their academic progress. So the point of all of these is that relationship and connection will help the students become more satisfied, have a sense of belonging, and ultimately connect to retention, which is what we want. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Flippin Wynn.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Dr. Koch, and good afternoon, colleagues. And I apologize if I sound a little stuffy. I will get through, and I hope it doesn't interfere with you hearing. Institutions transforming their institutions, their on how they work, are concerned, as Dr. McGillen mentioned, with several initiatives. And two of the initiatives that come to mind for me were the equity and then the course redesign and the co-curricular. Specifically, when we're talking about equity initiatives, we are also looking at institutions may be thinking about creating DEI spaces, not just sometimes a space in a room, but often they may be considering transitioning buildings, or even I'm putting this out here, sometimes even hoping to have spaces created, buildings put together or built. And so that is definitely an area where board insight and consideration is necessary, but also in reference to looking at hiring DEI professionals specifically who are working in leadership positions, who also are intentional hires and who are working not only with the cabinet, but also work with the board on strategic planning and et cetera. So those are, a few equity initiatives. Also in considering looking at making the DEI data much more available. And often, sometimes to do that, there are other services that our institutions have to consider, other places that they may have to ask for help or data, or so it might be another budget item. So those are other concerns with equity initiatives. We want to have the data available that helps us with our strategic plan. But in order to do that, we may have to do some different things, and that's also something to involve and ask the board. Additionally, creating partnerships with communities, grants or grant organizations. And I was listening to Dr. Smith, and having the board involved initially when we are discussing these equity initiatives, creating partnerships and with communities, even external members, even industry, where if you have those contacts, if the board has those contacts, then you can reach out and say, we may need help funding this scholarship, or we need help with that. So that is also, some of the initiatives that could be churning with our institutions as they are looking at increasing their equity and DEI involvement. The next opportunity that I want to just mention quickly is the course curriculum and redesign initiatives. And when our institutions consider these initiatives, sometimes the idea may be we don't have a current space. We do not have a current leadership. And so the transition in a space for more focused work on looking at curricular design and course design, also hiring. Some of our institutions are creating centers for teaching and learning and how to go about that. And that also requires different approvals and all of that. And so just that consideration of the hiring of professionals, and then also creating space for that. Not only to mention cultivating and continuing to cultivate culturally competent classrooms and teaching. And that fits in with the professional programs and developments. In order to do that and to do that well, our institutions sometimes have to reach out to different professionals or have different opportunities and options for our faculty to continue to stay on trend, to continue to follow the research, to know the research, and make sure that our students are feeling as if they belong, and that their classes are continued, our faculty are continuing to incorporate not only belonging and opportunities for self-efficacy, but we're also making sure that our faculty are aware of the options that are out there, especially to make our to help our students become competent communicators, culturally competent, and also able to get their jobs when they are graduating. And so providing our faculty with those professional programs and addition options and training opportunities is also one of the initiatives we have. And finally, participating in teaching partnerships with other institutions. There are several, and I also wanted to mention in creating some of these partnerships, some of the partnerships are with textbook publishers, and you are able to work with them in general, sometimes creating your own book sources. And all of those are different options that could be available when we're talking about curricular and course design initiatives at our institutions, and knowing how this helps and works toward continued student success. Dr. McGillen?
Thank you, Dr. Flippin Wynn. And Ed.
Yes, thanks, Monica, Vicky, appreciate that. Let me just share that many of our colleagues today have talked about a number of different initiatives. And again, at the center of all of this is our students, right? And so you see this overlap and dialogue around how can we help students become successful. Belonging is one of those, right? And we don't oftentimes think about it in that way, but as a student, do I feel a sense where I feel connected to the campus? Do I belong here? Do I see myself? Am I supported? And so in my work over the years in student affairs, student success arena, this is a question that myself and my colleague often wrestled with. How is it that we can help a student feel connected to the campus? Because when you think about student success long-term, students don't always leave your institution or are not successful because of academic reasons or financial reasons. Sometimes it's I just don't have a good fit. I just don't feel comfortable. This place, for some reason, somehow, I'm not connected to it in some kind of way. And so it's incumbent upon us, all of us, and all the way through the board to think about these kinds of things to support and build programs to help students, again, be successful. And they range all the way from the residential initiatives, so our students are living on our campus. What does that space feel like? What's in that space in terms of support mechanisms that are in place to really help students become successful? How connected are the residential experience to what's going on in the classroom, and vice versa? There are opportunities for those kinds of things to happen. I would argue that that students see themselves as they move about the campus holistically. Students don't break themselves into silos. We set up organizations on our campus for us and not necessarily for students. And so when students are moving from the classroom to being an advisor, to the health center, to the cafeteria to eat, they don't say, you know, I'm in the cafeteria now, so I'll take off my academic hat and so forth and so on. When they interact around the campus, they bring everything with them. And so to the degree that we can begin to see students more holistically, I think we're going to be in a better place to serve them. And so there are students who live off campus. What kinds of initiatives do we have to support those initiatives? If they're commuting to campus, do you have proper parking for students who are students? Do you have a lounge in between class times where they can congregate? those kinds of things become critically important. And it may not seem like big items to us, but to a student trying to navigate their way through a campus, they become huge. And I would also add, is one of the things that becomes particularly is that we ask students. Oftentimes, we construct or build programs based on what we think are best for students, and oftentimes we don't ask students. And so, to the degree that even board members get an opportunity from students and about the student experience, becomes important too in terms of informing them, in terms of how policies and practices are, and then in fact impacting students. But student life initiatives around student organization, that student to faculty interaction becomes important because again, students are navigating the campus as a whole person. They're not breaking themselves up into pieces when they interact with you. And so those things become vitally important. Community initiatives. How is the campus and how are students connected to what's happening around the surrounding community that they are a part of once they connect to your campus becomes important too. So it's not just what's happening on campus, but what is happening that supports and surrounds them as well, right? And then students have to be in a place where they feel physically secure and safe, and it's even more important these days. Shift to the next slide because I think I have the next slide of, and it really these really work together in terms of wellness. I think about wellness and the component that students are the view is that it's holistic, that we look as a student as a whole, so that they certainly are interacting academically, socially on your campus. And this, by the way, also goes for your faculty and staff as well. So let me add that piece. They're part of a university community. Board members and leadership at the university are thinking certainly about students, but in the broadest sense, you're really thinking about your campus community, which also involves faculty and staff. And so to the degree that they feel connected and supported on your campus becomes important as well, because then you have a true community that again is enhanced and supported, and they feel this sense of belonging and slash wellness. Do you have your health center connected in a way that is not one that's reactive and sits by where students only interact when they need something? How proactive are they in terms of interacting with students? Your counseling center, and we see in today's students that's becoming ever so important in terms of mental health and the mental health of students. Again, not only students, but faculty and staff as well, paying attention to those things. And these are questions or thoughts or interactions and conversations that, again, it's important for board members to have with leadership on your campus. And those faculty and student and staff voices become key and critical as well. Vicki?
Thank you, Ed. Dr. Drake.
Hello, everyone. I'll apologize on the front end if you hear some construction noise behind me. There is construction work going on in our building right now. But I'm going to first talk about financial aid initiatives and focus on this from the idea of things that the board will talk about is often on the very broad strategy versus what will often get reported to you around targeted initiatives. So when you think about that in terms of the broad strategy, the main discussions that will come up are often discount rate. So how much of your tuition revenue are you turning around and giving back out in institutional aid, both for recruitment and for the success of your students? And then also the overall balance of that institutional aid in terms of need versus merit, in terms of what the students are trying to track, and also how you're trying to help your students be successful. But then when it gets to those things that often get more reported to you, we start talking about more targeted initiatives in the financial aid space. And these tend to be things like emergency grant efforts that might occur on a campus, or finishing grants, where you might have students that are within 25% of completion and need something to either clear a balance or cover an emergency to help them complete. An example of this are like the Georgia State Panther retention grants that exist out there. Or you'll see targeted small-scale scholarships that are tied to specific programmatic efforts. And you heard an example of that here from the University of Louisville and their REACH scholarship and how it's done. You also see examples of that like at Purdue University and their Purdue Promise program, where you'll tie a small amount of scholarship to students being required to do certain tasks throughout the semester that help them be more successful. The last thing I'll talk about here that is a really relevant thing to be aware of, particularly right now in the financial aid space, is the impact of what happened with the HERF funding. So the Higher Education Relief Fund that came from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And it has complicated this space significantly because so much of the HERF funding was mandated to be directed specifically at students. And with that, institutions responded by either dramatically increasing need aid around students or expanded emergency grants, or in the second tranche of funding, where it became clear that the federal government was okay with the institution clearing balances, essentially to pay back itself around the student need, cleared out outstanding balances on a large number of students that was blocking their continued. The problem, of course, in this is that all that money ran out last year, should have all been spent. And so this has led to wild, extreme swings in terms of potential student finances of what's occurred over the last couple of years, depending on how your institutions decided to enact those dollars. We move on to the next slide, Vicki. So then the last thing I'll talk about is those risk and retention identification initiatives. And really, when you talk about this, the beginning space is your admission standards. So if you have any level of selectivity within the institution, then in theory, that's based upon identifying students who are more likely to be successful at your institution, or identifying those students that are more at risk and ultimately not admitting them. However, once you get past that admission stage, you have the students that that are your students, have been brought to you, and you obviously want to retain and graduate as many of them, if not ideally all of them. And a lot of what happens in that space on risk identification after admissions is dominated in the vendor solution market. This is where you see tools like EAB and Genzabar and Starfish and iSight and SkyFactor Benchworks all come in. This is in what might often be brought to you in terms of we're wanting to make a large capital investment in a software product to help us identify at-risk students so that we can do programmatic efforts at that. Whether it is in those vendor solutions or something that you do directly homegrown, they tend to get split by pre-entry versus those that are doing academic tracking. And so what we mean by the pre-entry is it identifies students at risk by the factors they brought into the campus when they came to you, in terms of academic preparation, in terms of socioeconomic status factors, in terms of geodemographic factors with it, to identify those students who might struggle the most and be able to target programming at them. Or you will see those that are much more related to specific academic tracking. So looking at, are students hitting metric milestones in terms of the number of credits that they're attempting and completing? Are there specific courses that we know that struggling in is predictive of a greater likelihood of leaving the institution? And so tracking how those students are doing in those courses. Or in academic warning systems where it is a direct link to the faculty who will provide information back on their students and identifying those students who might be struggling in courses. And with the idea of all of those then being that you can direct those students towards some of the other initiatives we've talked about in here, like academic coaching, like proactive advising, like more belonging initiatives around it. So it's more about finding those students that earlier in the cycle that you can help out that might struggle the most and pushing that programming at them. And I'll pass it on now to Dr. McGillen to talk about some of those more academic support and professional development.
Thank you. Thank you, Brent. And our last two categories, the first is academic support initiatives. And there are a number of initiatives that are impacting student success, but three that have probably the strongest track record for impacting student success and for particularly having an impact on our most resilient populations are course or competency specific academic support initiatives. So unlike course redesign, this is the attachment of tutoring, supplemental instruction, embedded learning assistance, learning skills support that are attached to courses. Often these students, these are peer-led initiatives where students will sit in the classes, be available to other students in the class while their course, the class is taking place, but are also able to lead out-of-class workshops to assist students to develop the skills necessary to be successful. There are an array of those initiatives that have been essentially layered onto an existing courses to improve student success in the courses. The integration of all student success services into one overriding student success center has also been an initiative that has I'd say really come into its own in the last 10 years or so. We've seen more and more institutions who are identifying the targeted programs that had spun up all over their campus and bringing them together under one roof in many cases, not just under one organization, and really thinking about how well these services are delivered to students to ensure that every student can get access to the academic support services that they need, whether it's advising, success coaching, specialized tutoring, accessibility support services, and other support initiatives. The final are academic bridge programs. Again, not necessarily changing the courses themselves, but creating bridges for the students. Most often we have seen these in summer initiatives, most often taking place between high school and college, but increasingly we are seeing institutions, particularly those who are trying to increase STEM success for underprepared students, who are building summer bridge programs also between the first year and the sophomore year to ensure that the students who are going into those next level STEM courses are ready to be able to tackle the more quantitative heavy experiences. These are often short-term, 1 month or 5-week programs, sometimes as short as 2 weeks, that focus on targeted development of skills, identification of potential academic gap areas, and targeted work with those students to ensure that when the classes begin at the start of the next semester, they are walking into the classroom literally on par with their colleagues. This can sometimes overlap into curricular redesign. I've seen some initiatives, for example, Bowdoin College in in Maine, had seen students struggling with the chemistry course sequence. So they created a special stretched out Chemistry 1 course where the fall semester included more developmental aspects of chemistry and background of quantitative courses. And then they offered a no-cost January or winter term 4-week, 3-week course where students caught up on the rest of Chem 1 so that they were able to begin Chem 2 in the spring semester with all of their colleagues. So again, looking for bridges that will enable students to be able to move with success into the academic arena. The final area is around professional development initiatives. And while it may seem strange to talk about focusing on developing faculty and staff when we're trying to improve student success, this is probably one of the most critical areas of improving student success. If your faculty and your staff are best placed to be able to provide the targeted services support, and you have a system in place that actually supports that work, you have a far greater chance of seeing great success for students. And when I speak about system, I'm speaking about the full faculty development system, which is not just that you're offering workshops, training, targeted professional development opportunities for them to acquire new skills, but that they also have feedback on their performance and opportunity, informative ways, not just summative ways, to get feedback on how well they're doing, how well they're applying those skills, and what areas they may want to focus on next to improve even more. And that the faculty and staff recognition and reward system is actually designed with meaningful, substantive, and strategic recognition and reward for those who have documented outstanding growth and development. If you offer one outstanding teacher award a year to the 500 faculty at your institution, and promotion and tenure is granted on the basis of research grants awarded, you're saying a great deal to your faculty about what is rewarded and what is recognized and what is important to the institution. So to the extent to which equitable student success is critical, those activities that are going to provide your faculty and staff with the necessary professional development support and a system that scaffolds that support will be absolutely critical for their success. We're now going to send you into small groups by institution. Ethan, if you can open up the breakout rooms. And we have, thank you for opening them up. We have breakout rooms identified by the institutions. We ask you to pick your breakout room. The questions that we're going to ask you to discuss is, we've covered a lot of initiatives. And by the way, we will be providing you with a one-page cheat sheet on all of these in our follow-up communication on this. How should your governing boards be updated on such initiatives that your institution is engaged in? How should they be updated in a way that enables them to provide best oversight of your efforts? How can you prevent information overload, given the array of things that we're talking about, and what frequency of updates makes most sense? So this is looking forward, looking for you to generate some discussion, some ideas. How should governing boards be updated on such initiatives, and with what frequency, and how to ensure they don't go through information overload? So if you click on your More button on the bottom, you should see the breakout rooms. If they've not popped up in front of you, you should see breakout rooms as one of the options on the control bar for Zoom. And if you'll see the Join button, you'll just join the breakout room of the institution in question. Okay, we have folks joining their rooms. If you need any help, just say so, and Ethan will get you into the room you need to go into.
Yeah, this is Kevin. Ethan, I don't see a More button on the, or anything about a breakout. Oh, now I do. Okay.
Oh, well, actually, Kevin, if you can go to University of Louisville.
Right. Got it.
Okay, artists, I don't see anything for me to.
There's Bellarmine and Simmons.
Yeah, I know, but I don't see anything to tap me to get into that.
Okay, Ethan, if you can put artists in the Bellarmine Simmons room. And Larry should go into the University of Louisville. Larry Benz.
Okay.
And Ed, if you want to join Kamal in Kentucky State. And Monica, we don't have any schools. Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry, we do not, and there are too many coaches and all of the other.
Yeah, Yeah, there's enough folks in the other room, so I'm happy. I need to, Ethan, we're gonna be asking folks to come back at about 2:50. I'll let folks know they have 10 minutes.
2:50. Okay.
There's Ed. Oh, Ed's gone.
Artist is asking for help. Okay, I'm going to join their breakout room. You can probably hold the recording for a moment. I actually just want to pause it. Is it possible to just pause the recording, Ethan?
Yeah.
There we go. I thought I.
Well, folks, I'm gonna start, and this Kentucky State is new to the project, new to the academy. So we actually spent quite a bit of time with some introductions and talking about what's next, and connecting with Dr. Walston, and he's new to the board there. So and he also talked about a number of the other responsibilities he has as a faculty member. And so I think with these three questions, a couple of questions that you may want to give him an opportunity just to mention, what might help him with his transition with the board and how he might be able to manage that information. Dr. Walston, you feel comfortable sharing a response to those questions from that perspective?
Okay, would you give me those questions again? Because I,
what your expectations are in terms of being updated with the student success initiatives that are taking place on campus. You mentioned that you all have a lot of, you have a lot of data that is being brought your way. So how do you expect to be updated with that information and strategies for preventing overload from your perspective?
From my perspective, in terms of our student support services area and the registrar's office, that they continuously compile such data that would benefit the board, and they would present that information to the board. We meet four times a year, which would be quarterly. Then at least two of those quarters meetings that we would have an update, major updates from those student support services relative to data. And then if any call meetings take place, then if there's a need to provide our board with any data so that we can look at that data, examine the data, and give feedback and ways in which we can support the initiatives or the kinds of things that are needed to make changes for our students in whatever area that would need to be enhanced and ensuring success for our students here at Kentucky State University. And being that I'm new to the board, I feel this would be quite beneficial to us at Kentucky State University at this point in time.
Great, thank you. University of Louisville, if you can provide some review of what was discussed in your group.
Sure, happy to. We had initial discussion around the sensitivity or the priority of the board. Is student success top of mind, and how much knowledge, awareness, focus is there from a board perspective on it? And it has been significant. Lori and her team put together a very robust strategic plan over a many-month period with student success measures is a critical pillar of it. In addition, hiring a new president, once it got to the board level, that was sort of some of the key historical successes that we used in evaluating those candidates. We then, shifted a little bit to talk about the use of, sort of lead measurements versus lag measurements. That as a board, sometimes we get caught up in a measurement like graduation percentage, but a 6-year graduation percentage, very hard to move the needle, and that there should be a higher priority around execution, lead-oriented measures. How many students come to the first day prepared with a book and syllabus? What is the percentage of students taking 15 credit hours and above, and focusing more on the day-to-day proactive measures that lead to success rather than a retrospective. And I think that about summed it up. Anybody else from our group have anything to add?
Great, thank you very much. And then last but not least, Bellarmine.
Sorry, they left.
Oh, okay. Wow.
We unfortunately lost several schools right at the hour, so it happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps us then, Vicki. If there's anything you want to close here.
I'll just finish with noting we will be following up. We'll be sending you the link to the recording and the slides from today, but I've also put in the chat the one-page document that we promised you. You can download it immediately if you like, but we'll also be including it in the email that we'll be sending up after today's webinar. It's a one-page cheat sheet, two-sided, of evidence-based student success initiatives for board oversight, just so you can have that in front of you as you're having future discussions of these kinds of initiatives on your campuses. Are there any other questions before we leave? Well, we want to welcome Dr. Walston to the Academy. Glad you could make this first webinar, and we look forward to seeing you in Lexington.
Thank you. I look forward to attending.
Thank you, Vicki and group.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.